Hello everyone and welcome to LukeLore, a quick deep dive into a folklore topic where I share some of the stories from around the world that have piqued my interest. Welcome, one and all, to my absolute favourite time of the year. It's Halloween once more. The final harvest, the end of the light half of the year sat on the precipice of the dark half. That slim measure where the realm of spirit and the other worlds around us all intersect into our civil mundanity, and the truly strange can be met abroad at night. This year is somewhat experimental, which is in part out of necessity. It's been some years of LukeLore delves into Halloween now, and all the easy pickings are already snapped up. That doesn't mean there isn't more to delve down into, but for this Samhain, I have a slightly different plan. For the first half of the episode, I'll be serving up some folkloric treats, what October the 31st looks like in the Welsh tradition, and a fascinating find back in Ireland for this time of year. Then, a trick for the second half. A work of short fiction set at Halloween. Storytelling isn't new to a festive LukeLore, but it's usually around Christmas time we get that. This is a classic with a mean streak, a story in the public domain by an all-time great, something to give you a tingling spine and a shiver of goosebumps this spooky season. Halloween in Wales. Oh, having just talked up treats, now here's a Halloween trick. I try to pronounce Welsh properly. So, over Wales way, there's a strange mix of folkloric traditions. To an extent, Wales remained fiercely Welsh in defiance of many invaders over the centuries, yet it also merged its native stories with wider traditions, such as how much Arthurian myth seems to come from Welsh poetry before being filtered through the ideals of conquering nobility, before then being sent back to mix together with the original tales. As such, Wales does seem to have its own particularly Welsh ideas surrounding October 31st. Calan Gaeaf is the first day of winter in Wales. Before that you get Nos Galan Gaeaf, meaning Winter's Eve. The night before the first day of winter is considered to be Ysbryd Nos, a spirit night. It was a time when Annwn, the other world, was at its closest to our world. We can see right away how this aligns with the pagan Celtic New Year, which would go on to become Halloween. There's a prominent belief that there are certain places that need to be avoided on Nos Galan Gaeaf. These are, in general, places that will always attract spirits to them anyway, so it's always fair to beware in such places. But on Ysbryd Nos, well, you're just asking for trouble. The spirits gather there anyway, but now it's their night, and you should be as far away as you can get from it. Crossroads, a favourite haunt of many a creepy entity, are best avoided on this night where you can. Churchyards and other such burial grounds are obviously just dumb at a time like this. But then, there's also styles. These are an interesting crossing of a boundary that spirits may be attracted to. It's easily possible many listeners don't even know what a stile is. It's a special section of fence, traditionally wooden, made to be stepped over relatively easily by a human, but should be impassable to animals. It's interesting that you shouldn't be using a stile on Nos Galan Gaeaf, a human-made obstacle to nature that only people could navigate, having purposefully excluded nature the unnatural may yet gather. Bonfires are another commonality, although, as in most things, Wales has its own regional peculiarities to the tradition. Dancing around the fires is encouraged, and everyone is expected to include a rock they've put their name on around the edges of the fire. There's a bit of solemn divination at play here. The community is supposed to come back the next morning and sort through the ashes to check everyone's rock. Anyone whose rock that couldn't be found is expected to be dead before the next Nos Galan Gaeaf bonfire is made. Not the best start to the year ahead. Although if you find that your rock was burned clean, that's supposed to show a year of good luck ahead. Just make sure you do find your own rock, whatever state of cleanliness it may be in. The good luck is nice, but avoiding a portent of doom seems to be key with this ritual. There's no time in the night for being impatient and checking your rock early. While you're supposed to dance around the festive fire for as long as you can, you're also supposed to run home before the last flames go out, and only come back in the light of the morning sun. It's seen as something as a game for children to play, but it also has a dangerous spirit linked to the practice. One specific entity, and her pet pig, from a previous Halloween episode. The Lady Gwyn, first discussed on how to have a happy but not headless Samhain. Once the flames are out, and only the glow of the embers remain, Lady Gwyn and her tailless black slow, Hugh Fi Guta, will begin a chase looking to catch a straggling child. A simple rhyme is a part of the final dying down for the bonfire ahead of kids legging it home to safety. There's no way I'm going to be able to sing this in Welsh, sorry. Let's stick to the translation. Home, home at once, the tailless black slow shall snatch the last. That probably rhymes better in the original Welsh, but not when I try to say it. Sticking around to this last moment is a test of bravery. Getting caught and culled by a wicked spirit who is normally an ambush predator, but is gleefully out chasing down children on this significant annual Spirits Night, is a bit of a poor prize for the child in last place. Y Lady Wen, or the White Lady, is often depicted as carrying her severed head around, and on this night seems to set her pet pig out to grab slow children who push their luck too far. It's not likely to be a good thing if you do get caught. A man from the village may even dress up in a pigskin to play the part, injecting some whimsical terror into the lives of small children, while teaching a lesson in not straying too far from home, nor staying out too late. This night on Nos Galan Gaeaf shows a few other older traditions from around the British Isles we can recognise in modern Halloween, with a few Welsh twists to them, of course. Guising seems present still, although highly specific. Men would dress up in rags and masks to look like evil hags before going door to door demanding treats, and any spare change they would then go on to spend down the local pub. In theory, this helps chase evil spirits away, as the parade of hags bumble about the night, driving away strange forces. But in practice, it may have also just been a good excuse to frighten people into handing over some drinking money. The traditional turnip jack-o'-lantern is present and accounted for with its protective warding powers, but it also comes with a competitive edge and an element of spooky mischief around the Vales. After making as terrifying a turnip lantern as possible, and they truly do make for frightening spectacles with little effort needed to give the effect, you're then supposed to hide the lantern somewhere it will scare the unwary. Hedgerows, blind corners, and anywhere unexpected. The Welsh jack-o'-lantern is supposed to be tactically placed to give a good scare. I expect catching out any drunk men dressed up as hags on their way home from the pub is considered a bonus. So, if you're in Wales, or of Welsh heritage, inject some Nos Galan Gaeaf tradition into your Halloween. Demand treats and drinks while dressed as a hag. Place your pumpkin for maximum jumpscare potential, all while making sure to get home safe at a reasonable hour, so Hugh Fi Guta doesn't drag you screaming off to be a plaything of Lady Gwyn. Ireland's Samhain hobby horse. We've unpacked a lot about traditional Halloween in previous years, with a large focus on the Celtic-Irish origins of Samhain. This has delightfully collided with something else I enjoy covering on LukeLore, that being the hobby horses of the British Isles. I've remained on the lookout for more ever since covering the Mary Lwyd of Wales in some detail for a Christmas episode. Imagine, then, my joy at discovering Ireland has a hobby horse that comes out at Halloween. This is a tradition preserved by County Kerry, and is the Lwyd Van, literally translated into the white mare. All hobby horses are a strange tradition. The lack of mention in medieval texts suggests they're a relatively recent fad of some mere 3 or 4 centuries, but that still comes with the questions as to why something so specific spread everywhere in more isolated times, and why they're so regionally diverse on top of all that. Are they older in origin, and simply shunned by medieval scholars only to be preserved in local traditions defying church censorship? Or are they just a more recent entry to folklore that happens to be pretty damn cool? I'm good with either. I love hobby horses. Let's get on to the specifics of County Kerry's fine white mare. She appears in official records from the 18th and the 19th century, and can also be a Christmas tradition, not too surprising if they are all aligned with the Mary Lwyd, which would make them both something of a winter famine totem, brought out to celebrate in defiance of the dead days. In this capacity, the white mare will be part of the Wren Boys Parade, a tradition I will be coming back to in December, which is when that particular one is from. What we are concerned with today is that the Lwyd Van also seems to have picked up some Samhain duties, possibly beginning that way, earlier than before being adopted by the Wren Boys, having more to do when it's time for the final harvest. In 1853, a William Hackett, and there's a fair few William Hackett of note, so I'm not too sure which one exactly to point to, but this one was a William Hackett Esquire who wrote about folklore for the Transactions of the Kilkenny Archaeological Society, including an article on bovine legends I found that I've saved for later. He would note the following. It is not many years since on Samhain's Eve, 31st October, a rustic procession perambulated the district between Pallycotton and Trabolgan, along the coast. The parties represented themselves as messengers of Muck Ola, in whose name they levied contributions on farmers. As usual, they were accompanied by sundry youths, sounding lustily on cows' horns. At the head of the procession was a figure enveloped in a white robe or sheet, having, as it were, the head of a mer. This personage was called the Lord Varn, the White Mer. He was a sort of president or master of ceremonies. A long string of verses was recited at each house. Who, then, is the Muck Ola that the Lord Varn is the messenger for on Samhain? Well, that's a little complicated. The simple version is a pagan god. The full story gets a little vague. It could be a minor, even local, deity. Furthermore, it could be a foreign god brought over to Ireland, and while offered some seasonal worship, they don't hold the same weight as older, more native ones. The Irish folklorist Kevin Danaher speculated that the name comes from the Irish root word Macalla, which means echo. This could speak to the nature of Muck Ola, or possibly the intent of invoking such a spirit. Parading about the name of any god on the thinnest day of the year feels like tempting fate, but there could be layered misdirection at play here. Whatever Muck Ola is, on the surface or hidden beneath, or whatever force calling out that name invokes, the Lord Varn procession acts a lot like the Mary Lwyd would do around the midwinter feasts. The procession would trek from farm to farm, accosting each household, and with its verses would appeal to the family who worked the land in a fashion strangely close to that of trick-or-treating. It would begin by appealing to their generous nature, exclaiming that the farmer they speak to has had a wonderfully prosperous life to have land to work for a harvest. All thanks to the blessings of Muck Ola. The tone would then shift to a discussion of how, should the father not be generous, then in turn, Muck Ola's generosity could be withdrawn from the farm, and it would fall into ruin. There were also verses about how Muck Ola would be angered by poor treatment of the Lord Varn and her procession. During this ritual, any goods that could be spared are given out to the strange procession to carry. Crops, eggs, milk, butter, and, depending on the farm, non-food items like wool. The White Mer would then lead onwards to the next farm along its planned route, hauling the goods along as they go. What ultimately happens to all the collected items is pretty interesting. The tradition goes that the Lord Varn leads onwards to a town after the farmers have been visited, where a group of local merchants will be waiting to buy everything up, and the coins will get split among the troop. This feels like an innovative way to give locals who aren't landowners a cut of the share for their families, as well as moving a variety of different farm produce into a more heavily populated area from a wider rural range. It also, of course, ensures the ongoing blessings of Muck Ola, and precludes the need for a Lord Varn and her parade to maybe exact some punishment in the name of their god upon any farm unwilling to share a cut of its good bounty. Samhain trick or treat, in the name of an old god and its White Mer messenger. Before our next section, quick ad break. Story time. And now for our Halloween trick. It's time for a story from Ray Bradbury. It's not a supernatural one, but it's most definitively a Halloween story. A bit of a nasty one too, hence why this is our trick. The October Game. Published originally in the March 1948 edition of Weird Tales, written by the brilliant Ray Bradbury. He put the gun back in the bureau drawer and shut the drawer. No, not that way. Louise wouldn't suffer. It was very important that this thing have, above all, duration through imagination, how to prolong the suffering, how, first of all, to bring it about. Well, the man standing before the bedroom mirror carefully fitted his cufflinks together. He paused long enough to hear the children run by swiftly on the street below, outside this warm two-story house, like so many grey mice, the children, like so many leaves. By the sound of the children, you knew the calendar day. By their screams, you knew what evening it was. You knew it was very late in the year. October. The last day of October, with white bone masks and cut pumpkins and the smell of dropped candle wax. No, things hadn't been right for some time. October didn't help any. If anything, it made things worse. He adjusted his black bow tie. If this were spring, he nodded slowly, quietly, and motionlessly at his image in the mirror, Then there might be a chance. But tonight all the world was burning down into ruin. There was no green spring, none of the freshness, none of the promise. There was a soft running in the hall. That's Marion, he told himself. My little one. All 8 quiet years of her. Never a word, just her luminous grey eyes and her wondering little mouth. His daughter has been in and out all evening, trying on various masks, asking him which was the most terrifying, most horrible. They had both finally decided on the skeleton mask. It was just awful. It would scare the beans from people. Again he caught the long look of thought and deliberation he gave himself in the mirror. He had never liked October. Ever since he first lay in the autumn leaves before his grandmother's house many years ago and heard the wind and sway the empty trees. It had made him cry, without a reason, and a little of that sadness returned each year to him. It always went away with spring, but it was different tonight. There was a feeling of autumn coming to last 1,000,000 years. There would be no spring. He had been crying quietly all evening. It did not show, not a vestige of it, on his face. It was all hidden somewhere, and it wouldn't stop. The rich, syrupy smell of sweets filled the bustling house. Louise had laid out apples in new skins of toffee. There were vast bowls of punch fresh mixed, stringed apples in each door, scooped vented pumpkins peering triangularly from each cold window. There was a water tub in the centre of the living room, waiting with a sack of apples nearby for dunking to begin. All that was needed was the catalyst, the inpouring of children, to start the apples bobbing, the stringed apples to penduluming in the crowded doors, the sweets to vanish, the halls to echo with fright or delight. It was all the same. Now the house was silent with preparation, and just a little more than that. Louise had managed to be in every other room save the room he was in today. It was her very fine way of intimating, "Oh, look, Mitch, see how busy I am. So busy that when you walk into a room I'm in, there's always something I need to do in another room. Just see how I dash about." For a while he had played a little game with her, a nasty childish game. When she was in the kitchen, then he came to the kitchen saying, "I need a glass of water." After a moment, he standing, drinking water. She was like a crystal witch over to the caramel brew bubbling like a prehistoric mud pot on the stove. She said, "Oh, I must light the pumpkins," and she rushed to the living room to make the pumpkins smile with light. He came after, smiling. "I must get my pipe." "Oh, the cider," she had cried, running to the dining room. "I'll check the cider," he had said, but when he tried following, she ran to the bathroom and locked the door. He stood outside the bathroom door, laughing strangely and senselessly, his pipe gone cold in his mouth, and then, tired of the game, but stubborn, he waited another 5 minutes. There was not a sound from the bath. Unless she enjoyed in any way knowing he waited outside, irritated, he suddenly jerked about and walked upstairs, whistling merrily. At the top of the stairs he had waited. Finally he had heard the bathroom door unlatch, and she had come out, and life below stairs had resumed, as life in a jungle must resume once the terror has passed on away, and the antelope returns to their spring. Now, as he finished his bow tie and put his dark coat, there was a mouse rustle in the hall. Marion appeared in the door, all skeletons in her disguise. "How do I look, Papa?" "Fine." From under the mask, blonde hair showed. From the skull socket, small blue eyes smiled. He sighed. Marion and Louise, the two silent denouncers of his virility, his dark power. What alchemy had there been in Louise that took the dark of a dark man and bleached the dark brown eyes and black hair and washed and bleached the ingrown baby, all during the period before birth until the child was born? Marion, blonde, blue-eyed, ruddy-cheeked? Sometimes he suspected that Louise had conceived the child as an idea, completely asexual, an immaculate conception of contemptuous mind and cell. As a firm rebuke to him, she had produced a child in her own image, and, to top it, she had somehow fixed a doctor, so he shook his head and said, "Sorry, Mr. Wilder. Your wife will never have another child. This is the last one." "And I wanted a boy," Mitch had said 8 years ago. Almost bent to take hold of Marion now, in her skull mask. He felt an inexplicable rush of pity for her, because she had never had a father's love, only the crushing, holding love of a loveless mother. But most of all he pitied himself. that somehow he had not made the most of a bad birth, enjoyed his daughter for herself, regardless of her not being dark, and a son, and like himself, somewhere he had missed out. Other things being equal, he would have loved the child, but Louise hadn't wanted a child anyway in the first place. She'd been frightened of the idea of birth. He had forced the child on her, and from that night, all through the year until the agony of the birth itself, Louise had lived in another part of the house. She had expected to die with the forced child. It had been very easy for Louise to hate this husband who had so wanted a son that he gave his only wife over to the mortuary. But Louise had lived. And in triumph, her eyes, the day he came to the hospital, were cold. "I'm alive," they said, "and I have a blonde daughter. Just look." And when he had put a hand out to touch, the mother had turned away to conspire with her new pink daughter-child, away from that dark, forcing murderer. It had all been so beautifully ironic. His selfishness deserved it. But now it was October again. There had been other Octobers, and when he thought of the long winter, he had been filled with horror, year after year, to think of the endless months mortared into the house by an insane fall of snow, trapped with a woman and child, neither of whom loved him, for months on end. During the 8 years there had been respites. In spring and summer you got out, walked, picnicked. These were desperate solutions to the desperate problem of a hated man. But in winter, the hikes and picnics and escapes fell away with leaves. Life, like a tree, stood empty, the fruit picked, the sap run to earth. Yes, you invited people in, but people were hard to get in winter with blizzards and all. Once he had been clever enough to save for a Florida trip. They had gone south, he had walked in the open. But now, the 8th winter coming, he knew things were finally at an end. He simply could not wear this one through. There was an acid walled off in him that slowly had eaten through tissue and bone over the years, and now, tonight, it would reach the wild explosive in him, and all would be over. There was a mad ringing of the bell below. In the hall, Louise went to see. Marion, without a word, ran down to greet the first arrivals. There were shouts and hilarity. He walked to the top of the stairs. Louise was below, taking cloaks. She was tall and slender and blonde to the point of whiteness, laughing down upon the new children. He hesitated. What was all this? The years, the boredom of living. Where had it gone wrong? Certainly not the birth of the child alone, but it had been a symbol of all their tensions, he imagined. His jealousies and his business failures and all the rotten rest of it. Why didn't he just turn, pack a suitcase, and leave? No. Not without hurting Louise as much as she had hurt him. It was simple as that. Divorce wouldn't hurt her at all. It had simply been end to numb indecision. If he thought divorce would give her pleasure in any way, he would stay married the rest of his life to her, for damned spite. No, he must hurt her. Figure some way, perhaps, to take Marion away from her, legally. Yes, that was it. That would hurt most of all. To take Marion. "Hello down there," he descended the stairs, beaming. Louise didn't look up. "Hi, Mr. Wilder." The children shouted, waved as he came down. By 10 o'clock the doorbell had stopped ringing. The apples were bitten from string doors. The pink faces were wiped dry from the apple bobbing. Napkins were smeared with toffee and punch. And he, the husband, with pleasant efficiency, had taken over. He took the party right out of Louise's hands. He ran about talking to the 20 children, and the 12 parents who had come and were happy with the special spiked cider he had fixed them. He supervised pinning the tail on the donkey, spin the bottle, musical chairs, and all the rest, amid fits of shouting laughter. Then, in the triangular-eyed pumpkin shine, all house lights out, he cried, "Hush! Follow me!" tiptoeing towards the cellar. The parents, on the outer periphery of the costume riot, commented to each other, nodding at the clever husband, speaking to the lucky wife. How well he got on with children, they said. The children crowded after the husband, squealing. "The cellar!" he cried. "The tomb of the witch!" More squealing. He made a mock shiver. "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." The parents chuckled. One by one the children slid down a slide which Mitch had fixed up from lengths of table section into the dark cellar. He hissed and shouted ghastly utterances after them. A wonderful wailing filled the dark pumpkin-lighted house. Everybody talked at once. Everybody but Marion. She had gone through all the party with a minimum of sound or talk. It was all inside her, all the excitement and joy. What a little troll, he thought. With a shut mouth and shiny eyes, she had watched her own party like so many serpentines thrown before her. Now, the parents. With laughing reluctance, they slid down the short incline, uproarious, while little Marion stood by, always wanting to see it all, to be last. Louise went down without help. He moved to aid her, but she was gone even before he bent. The upper house was empty and silent in the candle shine. Marion stood by the slide. "Here we go," he said, and picked her up. They sat in a vast circle in the cellar. Warmth came from the distant bulk of the furnace. The chairs stood in a long line along each wall, 20 squealing children, 12 rustling relatives, alternatively spaced, with Louise down at the far end, Mitch up at this end near the stairs. He peered but saw nothing. They had all grouped to their chairs, catch as you can in the blackness. The entire programme from here on was to be enacted in the dark. He as Mr. Interlocutor. There was a child scampering, a smell of damp cement, and the sound of the wind out in the October stars. "Now!" cried the husband in the dark cellar. "Quiet!" Everybody settled. The room was black, not a light, not a shine, not a glint of an eye, a scraping of crockery, a metal rattle. "The witch is dead," intoned the husband. "Eee!" said the children. "The witch is dead. She has been killed, and here is the knife she was killed with." He handed over the knife. It was passed from hand to hand, down and around the circle, with chuckles and little odd cries and comments from the adults. "The witch is dead, and this is her head," whispered the husband, and handed an item to the nearest person. "Oh, I know how this game is played," some child cried happily in the dark. "He gets some old chickens from the icebox and hands them around and says, 'These are her innards,' and he makes a clay head and he passes it around for her head and passes a soup bomb for her arm, and he takes a marble and says, 'This is her eye,' and he takes some corn and says, 'This is her teeth,' and he takes a sack of plum pudding and gives that and says, 'This is her stomach.' I know how this is played." "Hush, you'll spoil everything," some girl said. "The witch came to harm, and this is her arm," said Mitch. "Eee!" The items were passed and passed like hot potatoes around the circle. Some children screamed, wouldn't touch them. Some ran from their chairs to stand in the centre of the cellar until the grisly items had passed. "Ah, it's only chicken innards," scoffed the boy. "Come back, Helen." Shot from hand to hand, with small scream after small scream, the items went down, to be followed by another and another. "The witch cut apart, and this is her heart," said the husband. 6 or 7 items moving at once through the laughing, trembling dark. Louise spoke up. "Marion, don't be afraid, it's only play." Marion didn't say anything. "Marion?" asked Louise. "Are you afraid?" Marion didn't speak. "She's all right," said the husband. "She's not afraid." On and on the passing, the screams, the hilarity. Autumn winds sighed above the house, and he, the husband, stood at the head of the dark cellar, intoning the words, handing out the items. "Marion?" asked Louise again, from far across the cellar. Everybody was talking. "Marion!" called Louise. Everybody quieted. "Marion, answer me. Are you afraid?" Marion didn't answer. The husband stood there, at the bottom of the cellar steps. Louise called, "Marion, are you there?" No answer. The room was silent. "Where's Marion?" called Louise. "She was here," said a boy. "Maybe she's upstairs." "Marion!" No answer. It was quiet. Louise cried out, "Marion! Marion!" "Turn on the lights," said one of the adults. The items stopped passing. The children and adults sat with the witch's items in their hands. "No," Louise gasped. There was a scraping of a chair, wildly in the dark. "No, don't turn on the lights. Oh, God, 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 don't turn them on. Please, don't turn on the lights. Don't!" Louise was shrieking now. The entire cellar froze with the scream. Nobody moved. Everyone sat in the dark cellar, Suspended in the suddenly frozen task of this October game, the wind blew outside, banging the house. The smell of pumpkins and apples filled the room with the smell of the objects in their fingers, while one boy cried, "I'll go upstairs and look," and he ran upstairs hopefully and out around the house, 4 times around the house, calling, "Marion! Marion! Marion!" over and over, and at last coming slowly down the stairs into the waiting, breathing cellar, and saying to the darkness, "I can't find her." Then some idiot turned on the lights. Well, that made my skin crawl a tad. Poor little Marion. Let me know what you thought of the experimental episode split on this one. Also, specifically, what you think of the October game. It's a solid tale that implies everything, but delivers a first sting in everything it isn't showing. I've got a few more tricks up my sleeve as yet, and plenty more regional traditions to plumb for the season, but if this works for everyone, it could be how Halloween specials are handled going forwards. LukeLore is a Ghost Story Guys production. If you do want to contact me, there's the show's dedicated email, lukeloregsg@gmail.com, and the general show email, ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. Both myself and the main show are really easy to find on Facebook and other socials if you want to make day-to-day contact, especially the very active Instagram account a lot of the community gets involved with. If you want to support the show directly, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. We do have LukeLore merchandise available at the Ghost Story Guys online store. Feel very free to show off any you get online. We have an ongoing push to promote LukeLore more, and the dedicated Facebook group for the show is a pretty active success if you want to come join us over there. Also, if you want to see what stupid things I got up to this Halloween, I will be in costume at my workplace. As ever though, the absolute best thing anyone can do to support the show is to give it a listen. Share this around if you think you may know someone who may be interested, leave a review if you get the chance to help signal boost me, and most of all, I simply hope you enjoy what I'm doing here. Goodbye for now, and happy Halloween.